A pleasant day to everyone. My name is Coomansingh, and I'd like to welcome you to my revised pitch for empathy, where I shall be taking in all the feedback as well as going into much deeper detail for this game. The game theme. The theme of the game is the understanding of emotion and the visual presence of sadness and negativity within an individual. Moreover, it shall highlight the mental and emotional toll that a negative presence can have on us, as well as the depiction of someone who always tries to help people and what secondary effect it can have on them. The game mood. The emotional tone of the game shall be that of gratitude, as well as a balance of happiness and sadness. This combination is a result of seeing how your involvement helps others and how thankful they are for you, in addition to having sadness through encountering persons, their problems, and experiencing happiness from seeing them relieved. The full narrative breakdown. The story of the game involves you being able to see the inner emotions of people and having a strong innate goal of making the world a better place. It shall appeal to the understanding of the word empathy, whereby you are able to sense other people's emotions, alongside the ability to imagine what someone else might be thinking or feeling. In order to get an even deeper experience and further engulf yourself in empathy, players can choose their appearance as well as their name. Besides being able to see the inner emotions of others, mostly sadness, you also possess the ability to transfer someone's negative and sad feelings onto yourself, thus ridding them of it completely. You see this new transference power as a gift, and you now set out into the world to abolish negativity and sadness forever. The user interface. So for the user interface, from the start/open menu, you'll be able to either quit, which will result in stopping or closing the menu. Then you will have the options setting where you can check sound and visuals. In options in the sound settings, you'll be able to toggle the subtitles on and off, as well as adjust the volume through the volume slider. You'll be able to adjust the brightness through the visuals option through the brightness slider and adjust the text size as needed. And last but not least, you will be able to see in the tips and controls option, you'll be able to view the control scheme as well as the game tips and tutorials. For the user interface, for the first item, there shall be a map within the main menu. And next, I would like to have a tabbed menu, which will contain status, inventory, and tasks. For the status, the player figure darkens in correlation with the amount of sadness and shall start from 0 to 100%. The sadness, amount of sadness, health involves player health, and the toll, the amount of damage per second player loses in health in accordance with the amount of sadness. The inventory will just showcase the player's collected items, and then for the tasks, all the tasks that the player has in completion along with their requirements. For example, Sean find his lucky four-leaf clover, and Selena ward off a horde of angry bees. For the HUD heads-up display, in the bottom left corner, I would like to have a map. In the top right corner, I would like to have the task tracker, where it shall showcase the names of the individuals that you're currently assigned tasks for, as well as their task requirements. And then in the bottom right corner, you will have three bars or status symbols. You'll have your health, represented by a health bar, your sadness, represented by a sadness bar, and the toll or damage rate, which will include the damage you take per second, which would be allocated to the toll bar. The full systems breakdown. The premise of the game, as stated prior, involves the transference of people's sadness onto yourself in order to fulfill your life goal of making the world a better place by ridding it of sadness and negativity. As such, all the systems in the game play a role together to achieve this goal. For the first of the full systems breakdown, we have sadness. This is the main driver and foundation of the game, whereby it affects multiple facets of its gameplay. Sadness in the game is an element that the player hopes to eradicate through using themselves as a cleansing agent. Sadness is generated within an individual according to their current circumstance and is measured to the degree of that circumstance. Example, someone losing their balloon would manifest a small amount of sadness as compared to someone with a flat tire who would manifest a greater amount of sadness. The player can transfer sadness from a person onto themselves by completing the affected person's task. However, there is no method to this. There is a method to this, rather. Sadness is not only measured by degree, but percentage as well. Thus, the player may only transfer that percentage of sadness onto themselves once they possess the capacity for it. As the player progresses, they would encounter persons with greater amounts of sadness that they would not be able to contain within themselves. Therefore, upgrades to various player attributes are acquired through progression in order to accommodate these persons and situations. Lastly, when sadness begins to increase in the player, it not only affects them but the world as well. As a result, the music speed is slowed, the player becomes visibly darker, and the world becomes darker and more unsaturated, all in relation to the amount of sadness that the player has stored within them. For the transference, this is one of the main principles of the game alongside sadness. The transference ability is activated after the player completes an individual task and then embraces them through physical contact in some way, whether it is a hug, handshake, or other means. Once that happens, the percentage of sadness that was once within that person is now within the player, and that person's task has been officially completed. However, the player can only take in as much sadness as they can hold. There exists a capacity within the player that would begin at 25%, which once filled can either be disposed of or upgraded to a greater capacity. In order to dispose of the sadness, like how you would lift your mood in real life, players will be able to do various activities to raise their mood and in turn deplete a percentage of sadness from the capacity. As players progress through the game, they will unlock new activities that not only deplete their sadness, but take away greater amounts and even the entire thing. Furthermore, the capacity within the player for sadness can increase through upgrades and perks that are unlocked through progression. For health, this is a new addition to the game that was inspired by the feedback received from the first pitch. In most video games, there exists a health bar or some means to measure the player's life force or status, which usually complies to a win or lose, alive or dead scenario. Therefore, due to sadness being the destructive element within the world, the player takes damage gradually in relation to the amount of sadness they have contained. The amount of damage per second increases, and if it fully depletes a player's health, an animation plays, the screen transitions to black, and the player faints. Then, upon waking up, they will lose any progress in a task they are doing and have full health. While the player does awake with full health, their sadness will still be at full capacity and deal significant damage per second. The player must locate and perform some happy activity to dispose of some sadness, or else they will be stuck in a loop. For the tool, this system plays a role alongside sadness as it encompasses the damage per second. The tool is used to measure the amount of damage that's being dealt to the player per second, and as the sadness within the player increases, the tool, or rate of damage per second, also increases. Like the other elements, sadness, health, transference, all having upgrades and perks to lessen their effects. As the player progresses through the game, they'll also unlock upgrades and perks that would affect the toll rate or some other characteristic of it. Example, it can cap the toll rate at a certain percentage, have an event occur at a specific rate to lessen it, or even give the player certain boosts or traits or at certain percentages. For the movement is a necessary addition to the game that allows the user to navigate the world. The user would be able to move left and right on the screen due to its two-dimensional foundation. However, players can press up in some areas, enter buildings or new areas in the background. This mechanic shall be used to give the game depth and not just have the entire game be based on left and right movements. Additionally, the option of fast travel will become accessible to the players through progression as to not cause boredom, tediousness, or tiredness from walking long distances. For the status, this is the overall condition of a player, and it is composed of your health as well as your sadness. Moreover, your status visibly showcased with the amount of sadness that you currently contain, as you will envelop more darkness within you with the more sadness within you. As you envelop more darkness with the more sadness within you, rather. For the inventory system shall structure all the player's belongings and any items that are required to complete tasks. Like the other elements of the player, the inventory space can be improved through upgrades and perks unlocked through progression. Lastly, besides items just being used in accordance with the completion of tasks, some items possess special attributes that enhance the player, while some may be harmful. For the positive systems, this is on the account of the valuable feedback that I gained from the first pitch, whereby there are no win and lose or pass and fail systems implemented. From another insight received, whereby it was asked why both parties aren't happy after the interaction, is that the negativity or sadness is materialized as a physical plague in order to give it more significance rather than a simple feeling. Thus, after the interaction, you would be removing that plague from the affected person. Another insight was to have some form of positive feedback or reward that is gained from completing tasks. The rewards of positive reimbursement from completing tasks can come in various ways, besides overall progression, including upgrades to various characteristics, example health, sinus capacity, toll rates, etc. Perks that significantly affect the elements of the player, such as capped toll rate, increased movement speed, second life after health is depleted, etc. New areas can be unlocked through either completing a certain amount of tasks or a task for a specific person. And lastly, new activities that not only allow the player to dispose of their sadness, but dispose the greater amounts of it. For the negative systems, this is also on the account of various feedback that are received during the initial pitch. The insight that was offered was that there are no negative consequences, conflicts, or enemies in the game to not only offer challenge and opposition to the player, but give a well-needed lose condition, as well as a sense of danger and attentiveness. As a result, the health bar and sadness gauge comes into play. As the player transfers more sadness onto themselves, they'll begin to take damage, which is represented by the toll element, which controls the damage per second. As the sadness fills the player's capacity, their toll rate would increase, which would result in more damage being dealt per second. Once a player's health is fully depleted, an animation will occur that will transition the screen to darkness and the player faints. As the player awakes, they will lose any progress on tasks they are completing, would still be at maximum science capacity, take significant damage per second. However, they will be able to locate and find a source of disposing of their sadness as they will have full health. In addition to a win and lose situation, insight was offered on whether the game has any enemies or conflict to face. Due to the game's nature not being combat oriented, there will be no typical enemies and conflict. However, as the game revolves around understanding and life lessons, it will demonstrate to the user that they shouldn't help everyone. There will be malicious persons within the game that will unexpectedly give the player varying amounts of sadness, give the player items that negatively affect them, and even perform negative deeds to the player that would cause ensuing sadness. This therefore teaches persons that while they are trying to rid the world of sadness and negativity, there will always be people who are bitter, have negative mindsets and outlooks, and even taunt and disapprove of people who are trying to make the world a better and happier place. The full mechanics breakdown. The mechanics of this game shall combine all its systems in an efficient and effective manner to not only support its gameplay, but its storyline. The goal of the game is to utilize your transference ability to fully remove sadness and negativity from the world. You begin the game with 100% health and 25% sadness capacity, whereby the good deeds that you do for others transfers their sadness onto you to be stored. Progression in this game is achieved by assisting people with gradually increasing amounts of sadness, whereby you are compensated in accordance with the degree of their sadness or the difficulty of their task. There is no difficulty setting that can be altered by the player, for the experience to feel more natural and inclusive, rather than being a simulation that can be modified. As you proceed through the game, you would meet persons that may grant special rewards, such as new areas, perks, upgrades, and happy activities to dispose of your sadness. As a result, these characters are likely to be prioritized over others. The lose condition would come in the form of a health being completely depleted as a result of high sadness and in turn high damage per second. You would faint, the screen goes black, and you awake with full health, retain full sadness, as well as the damage per second. However, know you would have enough time to locate the closest activity to reduce your sadness. In order to balance the game, the happy/leisure activities will be not only time sensitive, but have a cooldown feature in order to discourage players to use the same activity repeatedly, but to have various amounts of sadness disposal. For the character breakdown, again, these are just some generic character representations. First, we have the player, you. They shall be customizable. They possess the ability to transfer other sadness onto themselves. They start with 100% health, 25% sadness capacity, and 25 slots of inventory space. Next, we have Farmer Francis, an NPC, non-playable character. The problem was his problem was he was driving his farm truck home and his wagon with all of his hay for his horses got loose. The task, number one, track down the wagon, and number two, locate the 5 hay bales. He shall transfer 20% sadness onto you, and the reward is that allows you to go horse riding, which disposes of 15% of sadness. Next, we have Little Lucy, again an NPC. The problem is that she was playing with her favorite balloon, then a strong wind took it away. The task is to help recover Lucy's favorite balloon, and she shall transfer 10% of sadness onto you. Reward: later in the game, you will get a random encounter where Lucy runs into you and gives you a balloon as thanks for saving hers, which will dispose of 5% sadness. Next, we have Granny Apple, an NPC. The problem is that she's made apple pies every day for nearly her entire life, and today she found a family of caterpillars eating her apples and making holes in them. The task is you must locate and capture the entire family of caterpillars and release them in the forest nearby. She shall transfer 25% sadness onto you, and you shall gain a reward where she bakes a fresh apple pie for you that gets rid of 15% sadness. We have Cammy the cow, which is another NPC. The problem is she was grazing in a field nearby with her 5 calves, but when she came back, only 4 calves were behind her. The task is to find her missing calf. She shall transfer 30% sadness onto you. The reward is that she gives you a fresh ball of milk that takes away 15% sadness. Next, we have Baker Bernice, an NPC. The problem is that she had an unexpected order for a birthday cake and has too many orders, so she's unable to get her ingredients. The task is that you must use Baker Bernice's ingredient list to help bake a birthday cake. Task 1, 4 eggs from Father Francis. Then you'll need to get 2 balls of milk from Cammy the cow. Then you'll need to get 1 stick of butter from Granny Apple. She shall transfer 35% of sadness onto you. However, the reward is that because you did such a great job and helped her out, you are now her delivery person and are given a cake that takes away 20% sadness. Then we have Gardener Garrett, an NPC. The problem is that he's the best gardener in the entire country, and everyone always calls him to do jobs for them. But he dropped his favorite pair of shears after being chased by angry bees. The task is that you recover Gardener Garrett's favorite pair of shears. He shall transfer 15% sadness onto you, and the reward is that the job he was going to do was cutting the huge wall of vines that was in the forest, which now gives you access to a new area. The full level design breakdown. Due to the game being one large world, there are no designated levels. However, as the player progresses through the game, they encounter more difficult tasks with some requiring greater sadness capacities and even time constraints. Next, we have a breakdown of Gardner Garrett's level slash task. Let me magnify this. Okay, so step 1, you meet Gardner Garrett right outside the entrance to the forest. Step 2, you speak and interact with him. Step 3, he explains his situation, whereby he was meant to do a job and dropped his favorite pair of shears while being chased by angry bees. Step 4, he then assigns you the task of recovering his favorite shears. Step 5, you enter the forest and see the shears, however it is surrounded by a horde of bees. Step 6, due to your transference ability being universal, you're able to understand the bees and their problem. Step 7, the bees express their anger slash negativity to you by telling you that Gardner Garrett knocked their hive out of the tree and rolled away. Step 8, you must now accept this side task from the horde of bees and find their hive. Step 9, after looking around the forest, you eventually find the hive and bring it back to the bees. Step 10, you put it back up in the tree, and the sadness at 15% is transferred onto you. Step 11, you return to Gardner Garrett's main task line and pick up the shares. Step 12, you return the shares to him and explain why the bees are mad at him. Step 13, he expresses his gratitude and apologizes as it was an accident, transfers his sadness at 15% onto you, and you're done with his task line. Step 14, you return to the forest and you meet the bees, which are grateful to you and offers you a large honeycomb, which exposes the 15% sadness. And lastly, step 15, upon venturing into the forest, you encounter Gardner Garrett, who explains to you that the job he was doing was to clear the wall of vines that are blocking the path to the new area, Coastal Crest. He leaves, and since you've successfully completed the task line, you now have access to that new area. All right. For the intended aesthetics, the world starts off monochrome, black and white, and then becomes brighter, more vibrant, and happier as the player helps the inhabitants of the world. The mood board, more darkened for sadness, more bright and vibrant for happiness. The color palette, see a very bright and vibrant color palette for happiness and a very dark and grungy color palette for sadness. For the development technology, I shall be utilizing Unity for the game engine and the software Fmod for music and audio. Here are my references, and thank you for listening.